To make it plain, I started the balls in Chicago as far as following the Harlem, New York format. The balls that we had in Chicago that have been going on since the late 1800s were geared more towards drag queens showing up at functions, taking the functions over, gaining the attention, winning in competitions like Halloween and things like that, and then eventually starting their own functions that featured them. I had been a member of House Biman, but because of inactivity, I was easily swooped up by the more active House of Avant-Garde, helping to get a video submission for the MTV Vogue to Vogue contest, which was a promotion they were doing to kick off Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour and her whole showcasing Vogue and whatnot. So we became one of the 10 video winners, our submission, which was Danny Tagg was the videographer, producer. He had studio space. He had the idea of submitting something. He knew me. He knew I was starting to Vogue. He asked me if I knew any other people that Vogue, and I knew by that time I had ran into Wardell. I was hanging around with Wardell pretty regularly. I had not met anybody else from the House Avant-Garde yet. Told Wardell, let's get together and do this video. We need one other person. Well, Wardell showed up with 2 other Avant-Garde members. So we ended up having 4 in front of the camera. And Mother Chanel, the house mother of Avant-Garde, was directing off screen. And we ended up being one of the $1,000 winners. That sealed my membership into Avant-Garde. And as Avant-Garde member, we started making appearances at clubs and you know, we would get dressed up in these costumes that we made. We had about 3 or 4 people in the house that sewed garments, and we made these elaborate costumes and show up late at night at the clubs and just put on a show. You know, we made our own stage. That got us a little bit of notoriety, so we started being asked to perform various venues, you know, especially in the nightlife thing, you know, at the China Club, backup dancing for people like during the music conference, performing at the Park West, performing at Bistro 2, The Rage, I mean, all kinds of venues, because everybody had Madonna/Vogue fever at the time. As far as Chicago development, I was one of the people that helped usher in the notion of voguing being a category at a function, because I was one of the earlier people that learned how to vogue and to do it correctly. And I also was able to use my writing skills and my clothing design skills and my voguing skills and everything. Basically, I'm an Aquarius, and I don't waste anything. I take everything and I use it all together. I make a goulash. So it just helped me bridge a gap between our mentors and teachers in New York with people that we were trying to educate here in Chicago about this new format. So, of course, a lot of people were familiar with the Southside Sissy Balls, and it would have been a force to reckon with if we could have actually combined or even introduced voguing as a category at the already existing balls. But those balls were pretty much steeped in their own tradition, and there was no room for them to merge or adopt any sense of change. They were pretty much established and set in their ways, and they were not susceptible to adaptation. Henceforth, they died out with the passing of Jacques Christian, which was very sad because all her memorabilia got tossed out with her. When I joined House Avant-Garde, I started putting together our newsletter. But because of lack of submissions from inside of the house, I expanded the newsletter to be a underground zine, which back in those days, that was the big thing. Now it's blogs and vlogs, with technology. Those are the big deals now. But back in the day, anybody could publish, desktop publish. They were called zines. They were just little magazines that you put together. You typed them, you hand wrote, you drew, whatever, and you Xeroxed them, and you made your copies like that. Anyway, I created one that was geared more towards, well, it was a combination of the club scene and the ball scene. And I bridged gaps between Chicago and New York, because that's where a lot of our networking was coming from as we were learning the ball formats and the terms and the phrases and the, how to score. Even though the House Avant-Garde started in '86, I didn't join till the latter part of '89, and then we still wouldn't throw, as a house, we wouldn't throw our first ball until December '91. Now, we actually made an attempt, well, me and one other house member actually made the attempt of throwing a mini ball earlier that year in '91 with the help of Tut, who used to be the head of the Chicago chapter of the Guardian Angels. He had connections with this club called AKA's, which was pretty much a straight club that was gay friendly, or a better way to describe it is back in the day when straight and gay people partied together a little bit more. We got our flyer together. We were going to have 4 categories. We spread out, passed out our flyer. A week before our event was supposed to happen, the bar closed, and they didn't tell us, they didn't warn us about it, so we were not able to do that function. Through our connections of becoming these little celebritantes in the nightlife community, we got hooked up with Kaboom nightclub. I actually made a connection with one of the promoters, and he allowed us to throw our first ball at the nightclub on a Sunday night. We were able to throw it as a free ball. The second ball would have been a few months later in February of '92, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre ball. And then our third ball that we had was As the Ball Turns, which was in July of '92. Now that would be the last ball we threw at Kaboom nightclub. Some politics started to arise. I was the one that was coordinating all 3 of those balls for the House Avant-Garde. I was the one that got paid for coordinating those balls. I shared the glory with my fellow house brothers and sisters, but when it boils down to it, I was the one that pulled it all together. Our house members were excited because we were throwing our first ball, but trying to get people to help me pull off the last minute things was a little difficult. But anyway, things came through. All 3 of the nights were successful, but not successful in the eyes of the club owners because people weren't buying drinks. After that, the house had to try to put our money where our mouth was and sponsor our own function. And we did that at an arts venue in Wicker Park called Hot House. That was the night that I was announcing my departure from the House Avant-Garde to start my own house, House of Enigma. At the same time, one of my house brothers, Kenny, who is now the overall father for the House of Omni, a legendary, iconic New York house, he was branching off from Avant-Garde to start his own house, House of Elan. So House of Elan and House of Enigma were considered sister houses at the time. We ended up having a joint housewarming. Um, Members from Elan and members from Enigma got together at a space provided once again by Tut. Um, Very instrumental in the early days of helping the ball community do its teething stage, I'll put it that way. Enigma got started. We did our first ball in December '93. And then the next ball, I kind of did it as under my name back at a club called Red Dog because I had made contacts with those club promoters, people who I made contact with prior from like the Kaboom days and other nightclubs. So I threw a ball called the Goofball, and this was more of there was a more of a mixture of the club kids set and the Vogue kids, and it was just like a more of a mixture of people. Although our first ball at Kaboom was a pretty wide range of races and backgrounds in attendance. The problem with that was that there weren't as many participants or people who were seasoned in participating in a ball. So I tried to make categories that would entice the ball kids as well as the club kids. Actually, the last ball I've ever thrown was the Zodiac ball, and that was thrown at Ann Sather's, which became, for a little while, became ball headquarters. Kenny Omni / Elan was throwing a lot of his functions there. That ball brought in West Coast kids. It brought in the JJ Rodeos. It brought in, we had a few kids coming in from New York too, and then we had the local kids, of course. The newer wave of kids that came, like I'll say the middle school or new school, came in and they felt they needed to bow down to New York, whereas the first wave of ball kids in Chicago were pretty much, we would be considered pioneers because we pretty much did till the ground and turn the soil in order for the ball community to take root. So a lot of people think the balls in Chicago, especially the newer kids, they don't think the balls in Chicago started or even got hot until 2000, which is far from the truth. They think, oh, the balls in 2000 did not bring people from New York, the Mecca, until, the 2000s. That's not true at all either. We were having people coming down, albeit, trickling down, but we had people coming down from New York. Being there as an ambassador of Vogue for Chicago, having a magazine that was bridging the club kid and ball kid communities locally as well as being here in the East Coast. Then when other people finally started being able to throw functions, that left room for me to actually start competing locally and competing and winning. My categories were Designer's Delight, of course the Vogue categories, Old Way, New Way. We didn't really have a big distinction between Old Way and New Way because we were learning any way that we could learn. But our claim to fame here in Chicago was being able to Vogue Old Way, New Way, or just combine all the elements, as opposed to when I used to travel to New York, and like at that time everybody was, like now everybody's Vogue film, but back then they were, everybody was arms control. Like they didn't know how to work the floor, they didn't know how to do anything but just, sickening arm tricks. But, we had a more well-rounded background. Designer's Delight, which requires you making a garment. I did, my only New York trophy that I ever won was for Designer's Delight. I beat out a designer who had like 3 evening gown pieces And all I had made myself was this summer short set, you know, a coordinated tank top and shorts, drawstring, sweatsuit material. I remember passing out a business card to each of the judges, and that, I guess, got me over. One of my other ballroom accomplishments would be the founding and moderating of a online forum called House of Balls. Someone had contacted me in early 2000 asking where the balls were happening, um, and I didn't really know because after my ball in '98, I kind of lost touch for a little bit of what was going on. So about that time, I was also studying web design. So I decided to start this forum to give people a platform to, you know, announce their balls, to, you know, exchange information. Around this time, I also created a website that explains what the balls are all about. It has a listing of houses. I stopped being able to keep up with all the houses, so I pretty much put a cutoff point for trying to record the different houses. Um, I had even put together a family tree of all the Chicago houses and even houses that Outpost here in Chicago opened up their chapters for the Midwest. Around the time I was getting into web design, I also experimented with the idea of having an online ball, which it got a little participation, but I think it was probably a little too early still. Um, it was before YouTube, so, but I pretty much had categories listed online, and set a deadline, and you could submit your category. You could walk the category online by sending a photo or a link to a video clip of doing whatever the category was asking for. And then I had drawn little trophies, and so I had a page where I would post people's trophies as they would win categories. It was called E-Ball, and I managed to have 3 episodes of that. Here I had been going to New York balls, you know, through my contacts, my New York contacts, my gay father, Hector Extravaganza, and David Extravaganza, as seen in Paris is Burning, who later became David Ultima, Kevin Omni, Willie Ninja. I mean, just all these people from the original, I'll say like the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s vets. Meeting a lot of them and networking with them and learning from them, and being mentored by them as far as what to expect when I went to New York. Even, you know, tour guiding them when they would come visit us in Chicago. I mean, it was just, I feel fortunate to have had the experience of meeting some of these people. Some of them are no longer with us, but I cherish the time that I was able to have with them, and to learn from them.